All right, so we are now going to look at a labor variance. I skipped over your next two questions based on the order you sent them because it's best to go over the full variances and then we'll circle back to those other two questions. So let's go ahead and look at a labor variance. I think after going over the materials variance, I think the labor variance will come a little bit more naturally to you. So depending on what order you're watching these videos, if you've not already watched the video I sent about the materials variances, go back and watch that one first because I went into more detail on that one. All right, so the labor variance is going to work very similar to what we just did. Okay, we're going to have our actual, oops, here's my pen here. We're going to have our actual, we're going to have the flex, and then we're going to have that comparison column in the middle. Same setup. Okay. Again, I go into a little more detail on the materials video, so watch that one first if you're jumping into this one without having first watched the other one. All right, so again, our formulas are going to be the same. Okay, we've got our actuals on one side, and that's just going to be our actual quantity multiplied by the actual price. Okay, then we're going to have our standard quantity multiplied by the standard price. Then we've got that comparison column. Okay, the comparison column is going to be the same, actual quantity multiplied by the standard price. Okay, over here we're going to have the price variance. Okay, and then over here that's going to be the quantity variance. Again, why one is the price and one is the quantity variance has to do with what we're comparing here. Okay, when you look at what we're doing, okay, if these two columns are different, it's not because they used a different quantity. This has actual quantity, this does too. Okay. So if these numbers are different, it's because this uses actual price, this uses standard price. So that's the price variance. Over here, we have got the quantity variance, because if these two columns are different, it's nothing to do with the price used. Each used the same price. It's because they used different quantities, actual quantity, standard quantity. Okay, so same exact setup as what we just did for materials. Okay, but the key here is we're going to have a slight difference in terminology. Okay, so let's look carefully. Okay? If you think about this, when we talked about materials, I mentioned you had to define the unit of measure. Okay, so when we talk about labor, we should still define the unit of measure. But I'll go ahead and tell you it's always the same. We talk about labor, the unit of measure is the hour. Okay. And because we're talking about people and their work as opposed to an inanimate object like a pound of material or I don't know, a foot of material or a kilogram or an ounce. Okay. We're talking about someone and their work time. Okay. So we're going to have a slight different terminology. Okay. But it's not going to change anything that we're doing. Okay, so look, I'm going to change my color here. Okay, I'm going to erase that Q. We don't talk about what quantity did you work this week. We say, hey, how many hours did you work? Okay, so Q, quantity, is now going to be referred to as H for the hour. Okay, it doesn't change the mechanics of what we're doing. It's just the way we talk about someone's work. Okay. Also, you don't say, hey, what price do you charge for your labor? No, we would say, what is your labor rate? Okay, so instead of P, we're going to make that an R, rate. Okay, Q is now H and P is now R. Okay, so again, here, we're going to switch both of these. It does not change the mechanics of what we're doing. Okay. All it does is we are going to replace what we were using. So here we had actual quantity. Now it's going to be actual hours. We did have the standard price. Now it's the standard rate. All it is changing our terminology. Over here we had the standard quantity. It's now standard hours. And this is, oops, I didn't mean to erase the S. Okay, but again, now instead of being standard price, it's standard rate. Okay. Again, all this is doing is now instead of this being the price variance, we actually call this the labor rate variance. And again, we don't talk about the quantity of someone's work. We're really talking about how quickly or how slowly did they work. And this is more our efficiency variance. For the life of me, okay, I am an accountant. For the life of me, I can't spell efficiency right now. E-F-F-I-C-I. E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-C-Y. There we go. Efficiency. Had to cheat. Look at the spelling. All right. So mechanics are still the same. Number one, unit of measure, it's the hour. Okay. When we talk about quantity, okay, now we're not talking about quantity, we're talking about the hour, and I want to know total hours. Okay, I really emphasize this when we're talking about materials. So again, make sure you've watched the materials example before you jump right into here. And when we now talk about price, remember we're going to call it rate. And remember when we talk about the price or now the rate, I want to know the rate per unit of measure. Okay, in this case, the rate per hour. Total hours, both standard and actual. And then I want standard and actual rate per hour. I've got to identify my variables. So let's go ahead and identify those 4 variables. Okay, when I look at what we were given, actual direct labor hours. Remember, I wanted those in total and they gave them to me. So for actual hours, I'm going to just drop in that 56,000. 56,000. Okay. Now I want to look for my actual rate and standard rate. I don't know how they gave it to me. So let's start looking. Actual rate, oh, per hour. They're making this one easy. Okay. 14, actual rate. Okay. Standard rate per hour, 13. Okay. Remember when we talked about materials, we had to calculate the price of our materials, but this one they just gave us our actual rate. Okay. And let's see, this uses our standard rate, 13. Standard direct labor, okay. And again, there was nothing we had to calculate here. They gave us these numbers, okay. The materials question was a good bit harder because we had to calculate the standard quantity of materials and we also had to calculate our actual price of materials. Now, finding these variables is really the bulk of the work. Okay, so now I'm going to go over here and let it show us the math here because I just don't want to use our time doing the math. All this is some basic multiplication. So again, we need to identify the variances. Okay, if this third column is different than the middle, that's going to show us, remember with materials, we called it the quantity variance, but here it's the efficiency variance. Why is this comparison, this column 2 to column 3, the efficiency variance? Because as you can see, each of these columns are based off the same rate. Okay, so if these numbers are different, which clearly they are, it's because we used a standard hours that was different than actual. So that shows us how did we work? Were we efficient? Okay, we did our work more quickly than our standard says we should have. Okay, again, companies love to save money. So less work hours means less labor pay. So that is going to be favorable because we worked efficiently. And that's why you can see the labor efficiency variance, that 23,400 is favorable. Okay. Now, although we worked efficiently, okay, it turns out we're paying a little more per hour. So our rate variance over here, column 1 compared to column 2, our standard says we should have been paying $13 an hour. We actually paid $14. So this difference happens to be 56,000 is unfavorable. Okay. The total variance is the actual column compared to the flex column or the standard column. Okay, and you can see the 32.6. Again, you could have just taken 784 compared to the 751,400, or you could have said one variance is favorable, the other one's unfavorable, so they offset each other. The unfavorable variance is bigger, so the difference between the two means this difference is unfavorable. 2 ways to get to the total. All right, I'm going to stop there, and then I'll look at your last 2 questions.